Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for joining me for another guitar lesson. So recently we've been learning about all of our cowboy chords, and we've built up a good vocabulary of our cowboy chords at this point. So great job if you've been following along with that. I did want to stop and kind of give you some pointers on how to actually form these chords. So now that I've showed you the shapes, sometimes it's not as easy as saying, oh yeah, that's the shape, and just getting it perfect every time. Sometimes it takes a lot of practice, as you may be finding. So I thought I would give you some tips on how to get these chords, new chords, learned a little bit faster. Whenever I'm working on a new chord, I like to try this technique of squeezing the chord and then relaxing my hand and almost like forgetting the shape and then trying to get back to the shape very quickly. And this is a way of just, it's sort of a memorization technique, but it also has kind of a physical kind of component for muscle memory as well. And we kind of tie those things together. Let's go ahead and take this G chord here. This is a chord we've recently learned about. If you haven't seen the G chord video, please go ahead and watch that one. And we have a couple different types of G. I'm going to try this one first, okay? So this is where each finger is in this shape. Now, I'm holding that down, and I'm going to let go. Okay, so I release the pressure. If I actually pluck the strings, the open ones you can still hear because I'm not touching those at all. But the ones I'm touching, you can hear they're muted now, right? So I touch them, and then I let go. So they're still on the strings. So now it's really easy for me to find this shape because I haven't let go of it. My hand is in the exact same position. I just squeeze down the pressure, chord's back ready to go. And then I let go. Okay, now as I get comfortable with this, I'll go a little bit further away each time. Little bit further away. Let go, and now I'm going to take my fingers just slightly off of the strings even. They're not even touching the strings anymore. They're just in front. And every time I'll go just a little bit further away and come right back, making sure the G still sounds good. Sometimes I'll periodically check when I get back just to make sure it's, even though it might look good, it might not sound good anymore. Still good, a little further away. Okay, you can keep repeating this till the point where you don't need to hold your hand on the strings. Your hand remembers that. You come back, boom. You got it. Okay, so I love that technique. I feel like that's a really good one. I do that with anytime I'm learning a new chord, which does still happen. I know a lot of chords now, but occasionally I'll still have to learn a new one because there's so many different combinations of notes that you can put into chords. So it's a cool thing. So this is kind of an advanced thing to keep in mind as well. You can use this trick as you progress, not just for these easier beginner chords, but they certainly work great for that. And I know a lot of people have more trouble with chords in the beginning, by the way. Once you've learned, a bunch of chords, when you learn a new one, it's generally not that big a deal in my experience. But I know at first it can be hard to get some of these down. So I think an exercise like this is good. Okay, so let's say I got that going, practiced that for a while. Okay, maybe, I don't know, I don't really like to prescribe practice habits sometimes if I don't meet the person in general, because I don't really know you or what your practice habits are like to give you an exact amount of times to try this. So I'm going to let you be the judge of that, but when this really starts feeling comfortable, like you can put your fingers right to the G chord, you'll know you're ready to move on. Okay? Then we'll repeat this process for a different chord. Let's say D major. This D chord right here we can do. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I got my shape down there. Now I'm going to release them. They're still kind of touching. Right back. A little off the strings. Even further off the strings. Until eventually I'm just taking my hand away from the guitar. And anytime I put it back, the D chord is ready for me. Okay? So take some time. You'll have to decide how much time, like I said, but practice this until that starts to feel pretty comfortably, and hopefully with some practice time, it will feel pretty comfortable. Okay, now we're going to change between chords. So this is another thing. First we have to learn all of our chords, and we have those shapes memorized. We can just, boom, play them quickly, right? But then, when we change chords, we really need to check that out sometimes too. We need to see what each finger is doing. Some chords are harder to change between than other chords. Some chords like each other more. Well, that's sort of a way they sound. You know, you could definitely say some chords like each other more because they resolve to each other better and they sound good together. But even finger-wise, some chords just kind of work better together than other chords. But nonetheless, we just want to take this approach to kind of map out what each and every finger does. So sure, G makes this big shape, and then it changes to this big shape, D. Okay? So yeah, that's what's happening. But also what's happening is each finger moved to a different place on the guitar, right? So this is almost the detriment of learning these shapes. We tend to think about them as these shapes, and you almost forget, well, hey, actually this finger moved over here though. Really, it's separate notes moving to other separate notes that combined make these shapes. But anyway, let's check out what happens when we move this G to this D chord. So this is the first finger that I see when I look over here, right? So I'm going to lead with that one first. And it has to go way over here, all the way across the guitar to the high E 2nd fret, right? So I'm just going to practice this chord change back and forth, and I'm really going to watch that 2nd finger. And I'm still relying on the muscle memory that I built from that last exercise to guide me to the shape too. But I'm also now giving my brain a process to like really see what's happening. Okay? Really looking at that one finger, just a 2nd finger. Okay, once I repeat that a bunch of times, then I'll do another finger. Now I'm going to look at this finger, the index finger. So it's on the 2nd fret over here. And then it goes, oh, look, still on the 2nd fret. That one's not too bad. It just hopped over the D string. Went like that. Interesting. So now I have a little more confidence. Now these fingers know exactly where they're supposed to go, and I just need to get this one to do what it's supposed to. So I'm still watching the 1st finger. And build that up, repeat, repeat as necessary. Now we look at the next finger, this finger. So it's here, and on D, it just hops to the next string over, same fret. Alright, we have that little motion. So I'm really just watching that finger. Now I've looked at all these, I've put them all under the microscope, and it's a lot less cumbersome and weird to just change between these shapes. They all have their own path, they know where they're going to go, they're not getting in each other's way. And this is stuff that you just kind of look at, take a few deep breaths, try this over and over again, and just kind of trust that works. It may not be the type of thing that you practice this and it just clicks like that, but I really do feel that this helps a lot. Okay, now let's talk about a few other things in this video as well. So in our last video we did the G chord and some various types of it, and we had some different fingering options. And I mentioned in that there are different reasons why one fingering might be better than another fingering depending on the chord that goes either before the chord we were talking about or the one after it. Okay, so from this, let's take this G to D as an example. So remember how when we did the 3rd finger, this one was on G and it had to hop over here to D? The note that is, rather, 3rd fret of high E to 3rd fret of B. Well, we also learned a type of G chord, if you want to go back and watch that video, that had both of those notes right in the same chord. So this is a variation of a G chord. Now when I go to D, it's actually even easier because I have this 3rd finger is now an anchor. That one is there. Okay, I watch my 2nd finger go over, watch my 1st finger go over. My 3rd finger doesn't have to go anywhere, and I just take off the pinky, D. Now I get ready, I watch this one travels over here, this one skips over there, the pinky goes back down, back to G. So you can do the same kind of exercises between this shape and D as well, but this one is a little bit easier because I don't have to move this finger. This finger gets to stay. Okay, so that's a good way to do it too. So let's do a practice progression now where we'll look at how sometimes different chords will sound better when you do different things. Alright, in example number 1, we're going to go from this G to this D, okay? It's all mostly quarter notes. 4 quarter notes of G, 4 quarter notes of D, then we'll come back to this G, and we'll let that ring for a whole note. Okay? Example number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, nice. All right, so that's one way where this particular G is nice, keeps that common. Let's check out some of the other G's we've learned. So actually, this is our main one here, and a lot of times this chord likes to go to E minor. G major is the relative major of E minor. E minor is the relative minor of G major. So those chords like each other, and they're very similar. They share a lot of notes. And when chords share a lot of notes, generally that's a good place to look and see if you can keep any of your fingers the same. And in this case, we can. If we're using this G to go to E minor, we can use this version of E minor. So when we learned about E minor, you can go back and watch our video on E and E minor, but I mentioned I usually prefer to use these fingerings because it's easy to get to E major, and it's easy to think about my E shape as kind of being that. But I also mentioned that sometimes it's good to play E minor with these two fingers, the index and the second finger here. And when we do that, we actually get to leave the index down from this G. So this G to this E minor, that would be a good place, a good opportunity to use the fingering for this E minor here. Okay, now let's say that this E minor is now going to a C chord. Okay, well I actually get to leave a finger down that time too. Okay, so that's another good reason to use this one, because from G, you get to leave the index finger down, let go of everything else. I watch the path that this one makes, just goes right there, nice and easy. Okay, now I leave the middle one down. This one has to reach way over here to the C note, and this one needs to go right here to the other C note. And boom, I've turned it into a C. Okay, where can we go from the C? How about a D7? D7 has this note in it, so we don't have to move the index finger. And we have a D7. So that all together, let's do 4 strums on each chord. How about this? Let's try that together. Example number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. So remember that other G we learned? Well, that's a really great way to get to the other fingering for E minor, huh? There's a lot of choices here. Same principle at work. We get to keep this finger, and it's a different finger now, but it's in the same place, the 2nd fret of our A string. Now it's our 2nd finger. That one gets to stay there. You let go here, it pivots right next to the other finger like that. Nice easy jump. And then the pinky just lets go. That's how you get from G, like this, to an E minor. Okay, so from E minor, a chord that sounds nice is A minor. We don't get to keep any fingers here. All of our fingers move, but these jump over in a very consistent way. Both these stay on the same frets, and they each move 1 string over. So let's see, my 3rd finger's on D now, it moves to the 2nd fret of G. My 2nd finger's on the A string, it moves to the 2nd fret of the D string. And then my index finger goes down here on the 1st fret of B. And then I have an A minor. So we didn't get to keep any fingers, but that's a good thing to know anyway, though, because those chords like each other. As I was saying earlier, they sound good together. They also are pretty friendly on the fingers, despite not sharing any of the same notes fingering-wise. They do both have a common note, actually, but because when we moved this one over a string, it landed here. Well, we had that one already. Basically, that one's in both chords the way we're doing it. We don't get to keep the same finger on it, but it does have some common notes, so pretty cool. Anyhow, from here we'll jump to A minor, and then how about we go to D7 from there, because also, like C, we get to keep this finger down. Okay. Or we can do both. We go to A minor. It's very much like C. We just take that off, and then we hop these over. I don't really do that one. I like that one. So we're going to start here with this G. We go to E minor and pivot around. We go to A minor. And let's do a split measure these last two. So when I said a split measure, what I mean is I split the measure and I gave each chord half of that measure. So where I had 4 strums for each chord, the C chord only got 2 strums, or 2 beats. This is a more accurate way to put that. And the D chord only got 2 beats as well. Okay, let's try that together. That's example number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, those are just some tips on how to learn chords, how to change different chords between each other, and also we talked about how sometimes we can leave fingers down on chords or keep notes common and do that. So I find all of these things to be very related because they're very much of how to be thoughtful when taking these basic chord shapes and really being thoughtful with them to make sure that we're playing them in a good way and we're not struggling too much with them. You know, it's pretty it's one thing to learn all the shapes, but then to be able to change between them can be a challenge. So you have to go really slow. You have to have maybe some methodology of a way you're going to practice it, like how we discussed today. And then even then maybe you're still running into complications because you're trying to go from one chord to the next. And perhaps there's a better way to play one of those chords. You don't always have to play the chord the exact same way. Perhaps there's a better way to play one of them that allows you to lead between the two more smoothly. Okay, so that's just what we wanted to talk about today, get you thinking about that. All right, but kind of a lot to unpack here, and I will make more and more sense as you learn more and more chords and see how they change between each other as you learn more and more songs. Okay. So for now, just practice your new chords, practice changing between them, and thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in another guitar lesson real soon. Bye.